First movie here is Sudan Remember Us, directed by Hind Meddab. This is obviously taking place in Sudan, predominantly between 2019 and 2023. And it plays almost more like a blog or diary entries in some ways than it does a straight ahead documentary. So on the plus and minus side of this, on the minus side, I think this is a documentary that would have benefited slightly by being a little more traditional as far as like maybe having a little bit of background on the history of Sudan, giving us a historical quick rundown and breakdown of kind of the various factions and political situations that have led to the events that we see in this movie or the current events of the movie. But instead, it is right there in the thick of it. And essentially, a big chunk of this movie is just on the ground video of people, especially more like students and stuff, doing sit-ins and various protests in Sudan. And the main filmmaker, it seems like the main filmmaker is actually not from Sudan. I think they're from Tunisia, but they are in Sudan and they're just, like I said, they're on the ground, like in cartoon place, talking to people and watching the events. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminded me of Tiananmen Square. And if Tiananmen Square in China, there was a big student uprising and they sit in this giant kind of camp built up in Tiananmen Square. And then the government basically came in and just crushed it, literally crushed people and killed people and just crushed the whole uprising and attempt by the people to overthrow this kind of authoritarian regime and, want the people trying to take power. Very similarly here, you've got from all accounts, at least from the people on the ground, they see the Sudanian government as this kind of corrupt, it's like an Islamic state, but a lot of these people that are protesting are Islamic and they seem to be very devout Islamic people. And it's more like they're against the perceived corruption and the military kind of dictatorship that's going on. And at the very beginning, you're at current day, which is like 23 or so on, like I said, and you see this wall and it has all these like paintings of protesters and dissidents who have presumably died or at least been imprisoned. And then you get the flashback, like I said, to 2019 in one of these huge kind of sit-ins and all the people talking about what their goals are and singing songs and reciting poetry and rapping and all this kind of stuff. Very freeform. And then their hope and anger and the thoughts that they can actually do something, and then the inevitable crackdown that occurs. One of the more interesting parts of that crackdown, because you then start going from 2019, you start going through kind of the events that lead to the current day. Once again, I say current day of 2023, current day in this film's world. And one of the things really interesting is there seems to be this interesting sort of a compromise that occurs between the government and the protesters, student protesters mostly, but a lot of protesters of different ages, but mostly in that kind of college age. And the compromise is, I think this said was going to be like 18 months of military rule, and then they give it 18 months of citizen rule. And all of these protesters are doubting that when the 18 months is up, that the government will give over the reins to the citizens. So part of this movie is waiting for that deadline and then seeing what happens when that deadline hits. As you might guess, it's a pretty frustrating film if you are somebody who sees this kind of regime in various places around the world and just always wants or hopes that people can have some sort of say in their own lives, in their own worlds, and that the might won't win, the military won't win, the forces of power and restriction won't win. Unfortunately, they usually win, and that's the frustrating part. And how is this as a documentary, though? A documentary should do a few things. For me, I don't really know anything about Sudan, so it's really interesting to see that there's this. I'm not going to be surprised in various African countries that there might be war or so on going on, some kind of conflict. But the fact that there's this heated, very, ideologically deep need by some of the people to get back their nation, to gain it back, and to know that this is all going on, and it's really just not even talked about. You might hear something, you might think of something similar in, I don't know, Ukraine or Gaza even. But here, who hears about Sudan? In America, at least, not anybody really. And it was just, so add another place to be heartbroken about. So as far as that goes, it was interesting and well done and engaging. Like I said, the minus to the film, I think for most people, it's going to be not having this real kind of solid through line to grab onto. So you do come back to certain different students over and over again, but not consistently enough for me. Like I almost wanted this to be one of those movies where they pick maybe 2 or 3 people and just stay with them and follow them straight on through. Now, I don't know if logistically that was even possible for the filmmaker, because it seems like stuff on the ground is always changing and people are disappearing and people are leaving. And the filmmaker seemed like they probably were coming back over and over again. And I think finding and staying with these people consistently probably wouldn't have been as easy. But I think if it would have had that, it would have given you something a little more tangible to grab onto, as opposed to just, like I said, more of a free form. It's almost a tone poem in some ways, like this angry poem about what's going on there, and you just are flowing in it. You're flowing in it in different periods of uprising, and you're just there, like I said, on the ground in the midst of it. So I guess immersively that part is well done, but as far as the overall emotional kind of arc and really getting to feel like what everything means and how it's progressing, that was a little harder to grab onto. So I think I would say overall, I'll probably give this a 3 stars for documentary. I feel like I wanted a little more from it, but I'm really glad it exists. And I think that especially for people who like documentaries and want to learn about things and places they don't know about, this does that job. I just wanted it to be more, just really hit me. That's where like a movie, No Other Land or something we had like earlier this year, dealing with not the same kind of concept, but a similar sort of a conflict and uprising and so on and so forth. By being so focused on basically 2 people, it really had much more of an impact than this one did for me.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews and interviews, please subscribe to my Deepest Dream channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for your support. Take care.